So this is the last Sunday of our sermon series that works in conjunction with this book that we've read together for June and July. And if you're our guest today, let me say, if you'd like a copy of this book to see what we've been learning together, you can have one for free. It's available out in the narthex on the counter. Feel free to grab it on your way out. So by now, you know that what the book is counseling us about are simple interpersonal behaviors that we as individual Christians can practice in our everyday life to be on mission with God and the world. And the acronym for that is BELLS. Bless, eat, listen to the Spirit, learn Christ, and be sent out into the world in which God is already at work, and record or remember what it is that you experience there. So this last chapter really isn't a chapter. You guys got off easy this week. It's all of 4 or 5 pages. And in it, it lands on 2 final emphases. The first has to do with habits and habit formation, and the second has to do with the necessity of spiritual traveling companions, specifically as we try to live out these BELLS habits together. We're going to focus for the bulk of the sermon on that latter emphasis, the necessity of spiritual traveling companions. And then when I get toward the end of the sermon and we wrap up the whole book and the whole sermon series, we'll touch on habits. To talk about the necessity of spiritual traveling companions, I'd like us to turn our attention this morning to one of the most down-to-earth, practical books in the entire Bible, the collection of wisdom sayings that we call Proverbs. And specifically, we're going to look at 3 verses from Proverbs 27, which is a chapter in Proverbs that emphasizes relationships in a way that you don't see in some of the other chapters within that same book. First, please consider Proverbs chapter 27, verse 17. As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. That picture up on the screen reminds me of one of the great Father's Day gifts I've ever gotten in my life about 10 years ago. So one of my hobbies in life is that I'm a cook, and I picked that up late in life, and I really do enjoy that in my time off. I love to cook for my family. But I'm also frugal, i.e. a cheapskate, which means that I buy very cheap knives. And about 10 years ago, while living in Michigan, I had bought so many cheap knives that we began to have not just a knife drawer in the kitchen, we had an auxiliary knife drawer in the kitchen as well. And my children, yes, my children, who at the time were in junior high and elementary school respectively, thought to themselves, you know what Dad needs more than anything else in Dad's life this Father's Day? More than a gift card, more than an ugly tie, Dad needs a knife sharpening rod for those terrible knives that he continues to buy week after week, month after month at Big Lots and Walmart. And boy, were they right. I advise you that if you, like me, don't like to spend hundreds of dollars on your cooking utensils, invest in a knife sharpening rod, because it makes the most terrible knives work wonderfully. See, what the proverbist is telling us is that just like there are no self-sharpening knives in the world, there are no self-sharpening people in the world either. This is a role that we need each other to play. It is a necessity. It is not voluntary. It's not a luxury. I cannot be the best version of myself unless somebody else sharpens me. Inevitably, you will be a worse version of who God intends you to be unless you have somebody in your life playing this role. When I encounter you, when I talk to you, when you encounter me and you talk to me, part of what you're encountering, maybe the bulk of what you're encountering, is all the ways that I've let people sharpen me in the past, or all the ways I have not. Whatever else I am, whatever else defines me, it is the way that I have let other people sharpen me to make me something I could not be without them. Who are those people in your life? I bet you could come up with some names of people in the past who have done that for you, who have left an indelible mark, who maybe even decades later have continued to have a lingering effect on you and pull you up to heights that you otherwise could not reach without them. I bet you have those people. But who are those people for you right now? Because they are indispensable to your vitality and fulfillment as a Christian person, let alone a human being. Who are the people who sharpen you like a knife? One of the ways you can gauge the quality of your life, your satisfaction in life at any given time, is whether or not you have people like this in it. You will feel sadder, more lonely, less meaningful and purposeful the less of these people that you have at any given time. When I reflect back on my life at the times when I was happiest and most fulfilled, invariably, it's also the time in my life when I had the most of these people in it. I bet that's true for you too. Same goes for church, by the way. For us to thrive as a church, we need to function this way for each other. Our ideas aren't good enough. We need them to be sharpened by others. The solution any one person would come up with will always be inadequate to the solution that a wise group comes up with. This is also true about mission. If we're going to take seriously being a church on mission with God in the world, then we need to sharpen each other in our execution of that. Way back in the day, I took church planter training. This is 20 years ago. And one of the things they teach you in church planter training is for you to start a church that actually reaches your community and doesn't just bring in Christians from other churches. You've got to start by asking the people you hope to reach what it is that they need. Don't tell them. Ask them. In the parlance of this proverb, you are asking the community, the disenfranchised, the neighbors around you to sharpen you as you execute God's mission in the world. This is the necessity of spiritual traveling companions. Same chapter, just a few verses earlier. Proverbs 27, verse 6. Wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy kisses you over and over again. Someone was in my office this week who shall go nameless, and they happened to be in there when I was working on this particular verse from Proverbs 27, and I mentioned it to them, and their reply to me was, "Boy, I'd like enemies like that." Wounds from a friend can be trusted, but the kisses of an enemy happen over and over again. Your truest spiritual companions in life, be it in the past or the present, are those who can tell you what you need to hear, but you don't want to hear. Your best spiritual friends and partners in life are the ones who can give voice to the things that you don't even like to tell yourself. But let's be clear. The kind of friend that is being talked about here in Proverbs 27:6 is very different from a kind of person you sometimes encounter in the world, and yes, even church, and that kind of person would be called a wounder. What's a wounder? A wounder is somebody who couples the aggressiveness of an angry hippopotamus with the emotional intelligence of a trilobite. They are people who wound others and either don't know that they do with their brusqueness or don't care that they do because they think so much of their own opinion and thus conversely think so little of others. That's not what Proverbs is describing. Proverbs is describing the kind of person who has earned a special place in your life. Someone who has shown themselves to love you, to be committed to you. And oftentimes the way they earn that place in your life is that they are some of your greatest encouragers and affirmers. You know that they are in your corner for you, and they've proven it to you. So when the time comes for them to tell you what you may not want to acknowledge, your ears are open to hear it. This is the necessity of a spiritual traveling companion. Who are those people in your life? Who have they been? It cannot just be your family. There are some things you need to hear that your spouse cannot tell you. There are some things you need to hear that your parent cannot tell you, or your child cannot tell you. You need a traveling companion who is not related to you biologically, who can do this when it's necessary. Same goes for churches. See, being on mission with God in the world is very much an act of trial and error. You may not know that, but for every good idea that takes root and blossoms, there are 9 ideas that you try and they don't work. And we have to be able to say that to one another. When I think of this verse as applied to churches being on mission with God in the world, I think back vividly to a time in the life of our church in Michigan, when we were just starting to try to figure out how to impact our neighboring community. And a small group of people in our church said, you know, there's a trailer park about a 5-minute drive from our church. And this is a trailer park that was largely comprised of working poor people, unemployed people, single retirees who were just living from Social Security check to Social Security check. And they said, Pastor Chris, can we try to find a way to invest in the people of this trailer park? And I said, sure, let's try. And so our first attempts were, at the beginning of the school year, we threw a big carnival for this trailer park. We gave away backpacks full of school supplies for all the kids in the trailer park. On occasion, the manager of the trailer park would call me and say, so-and-so can't make their rent this month. Can you guys help? And our church there is like KirkWood here. It has a very robust balance in its benevolence fund, and we would write a check. And so it went for a few months until Scott, the manager, called me into his office and he said, you know, Chris, I know you guys mean well, but this doesn't feel like you're caring for us and our people. This feels like a drive-by, where you're doing a nice event and you're throwing it out the window of your car as you drive by our trailer park and you wave, God bless, goodbye. That was a wound from a friend. And we, as a burgeoning church on mission with God in the world, needed to hear it, and it changed what we did. He said, if you really want to help us and invest in our people, teach them basic financial skills, because so many of them don't have that. If you really want to help, get some people to tutor our kids. If you really want to help, have your church simply attend the existing community events that we already have. Just be our friend. It's life-changing for our church to listen to that person who knew his clientele so well, and for him to tell us something we might not want to hear, but that had such an eventual positive effect. Who are the people in your life who can tell you the things you need to hear but may not want to? Here's the emotional counterpoint to Proverbs 27, verse 6, and it occurs just 3 verses later. Perfume and incense bring happiness to the heart, just like the joyous delight that springs from a friend's soulful counsel. This is aromatherapy. That's the metaphor here, right? What are your favorite smells in life? Do you know what your husband or your wife smells like when it's good? Do you know their fragrance of choice? My kids are great. One of the things, of the many things I love about my kids, one of them is they're very verbally affirming. So when they walk in the house in the afternoon and Dad's got something cooking in the crock pot, be it Irish pub stew or carne adobada from New Mexico, they walk in the house and the first thing they do is they take a deep breath in the kitchen. They say, "Oh, Dad, that smells so good. When are we going to eat?" That's what comes to mind for me when I hear this verse. And I'll bet you've got times in your past when the input of a friend, a rich discussion with a group, smelled that good to you. Just this past week, my wife's small group met on Thursday evening, as they always do, to use and work through the book debriefing questions. And after a longer discussion than normal, I hear my wife's feet coming down the stairs of our townhouse, and there's this radiant glow on her face. And she looks at me there on the couch, and the first words out of her mouth were, "Chris, I wish you could have heard that discussion." Everybody is so energized and invigorated. Everybody is thinking new thoughts. There are new creative ideas coming to the surface. We are just so jazzed together. I wish you could have heard it. Yes, that's what Proverbs 27:9 is describing. That we all need people in our life who do that for us. And we need to do that for each other as we try to live out these behaviors together. For you see, joy is contagious as the common cold. It rubs off on one another. And moreover, joy is the thing that sustains you when you figure out that there are no magic bullets to church growth. There are no quick fixes to being on mission for God in the world. It takes persistence, steadiness, and it's slow. And the reason we can do that over the long haul is that together we share how we see what God is doing, how we see God using us as we eat with others and bless others and learn Christ for ourselves and share it with others. When that happens, the joy cannot be contained. It is the gas in the fuel tank of our mission that will sustain us going forward. This is why spiritual traveling companions are essential. But this being said, we just need to pause for a moment and talk about how the wisdom of Proverbs in the Old Testament flies in the face of something that defines us as a culture. Whatever else can be said about America as a society, the bulk of sociologists would tell you, you live in the most individualistic country that the world has ever seen. And individualism and all that it imports flies in the face of believing that spiritual traveling companions are a necessity, not a luxury. There's a classic in the field of Christian community formation by Julie Gorman, and I want to cite 3 paragraphs from it that speak to this problem that we all must face as we think about establishing spiritual traveling companions here within Kirkwood. Julie Gorman writes, quote, "Humanity's sin is not the assertion of individuality in community, but instead individualism. The insistence on individual autonomy and self-sufficiency, both from God and from each other. Most of us have been raised to believe that strength lies in independence. Society tells us that we must make our own way. We've come to believe that only when we no longer depend on others can we say that we've reached full maturity. We see need as immature and dependence as weakness. To see ourselves as needfully bound together, spiritually, emotionally, relationally, is almost entirely absent from our American thoughts and beliefs. In fact, the stronger it is said how badly we need each other, often the more uncomfortable we get." Unquote. For you and I to take to heart and truly believe what the Proverbs say, we are going to have to face in ourselves this unconscious bent toward individualism, believing that dependence is weakness, that relying on others is just immaturity, and that when we arrive, we won't need people the way that we saw Solomon describe. Don't you believe it? The more you grow, the more dependent you become. The more you grow, the more you need others to sharpen you, tell you what you don't want to hear, and fill you with joy. Don't leave this book and this last chapter thinking that you can do this on your own. To that end, the author of our book is Michael Frost, one of his running buddies, another leader in church in the post-Christian world globally is named Alan Hirsch, and he says this: God's mission for his church is too big for anyone to accomplish alone, and too important even to try. Who will be your partners as you seek to live out a Bell's kind of life going forward from here? Let me wrap up the entire book this way, because it's really not the finish of anything. Now we're really starting the work of figuring out how we will embody what we have learned from the book in our particular context, in our particular way. To wrap up the entire book, now let's talk about habits for a moment. The great Greek philosopher Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do. Thus, excellence is not an act, but a habit." The great English poet from the 1600s, John Dryden, said that same thing this way: "We first make our habits, and then our habits make us." What will our habits be? Do we want to be a Bell's kind of church? In time, it will remake every one of us. More like Christ, and more like Christ for the world. And last, just a single verse from Psalm 37. The psalmist of old says, "Commit your ways to the Lord, Trust in him and he will act. The subjects of those three clauses are the most important thing. What's our part? Commit and trust. What's God's part? To act. Can you do that? Can you commit? Can you trust? And then can you believe he will act? Will you pray with me? Our Father in heaven, we pray very simply today that you help us seek out spiritual traveling companions like we saw described in Proverbs. If we're already in a class or a group, may we aspire to do that for one another. If we aren't in a class or a group or don't have that in some other venue in our life, then motivate us to seek it out. And most of all, we say to you that we are committed, not just to being a church on mission with you in the world, but being individual disciples who are. We commit to that. We trust you in that. And because of that, we know you will act. Father, we pray this for your sake, our sake, and the sake of your kingdom. Amen.